It's widely known that the M4 iPad Pro is a hardware powerhouse, but how does it hold up in the real world? After spending the last few days putting it to the test, I've uncovered 3 things I love, 1 thing I'm neutral about, and 3 things that left me disappointed. Join me today as we dive into these discoveries and tackle the burning question: can the iPad Pro finally replace my MacBook? And stick around until the end for my thoughts and hopes for the future of iPad Pro, which include my predictions for WWDC that you do not want to miss. Let's start with the first thing I love about this iPad, and that's the design. I opted to go with the silver color, and it was the perfect choice as it hides fingerprints and grime better than the darker models in my opinion. It pairs really nicely with the new white Magic Keyboard, which I'll give my thoughts on later in the video, but let's get to the elephant in the room. Can we just talk about how thin this device is? It's incredible what Apple was able to create here. It's so thin, I'd feel worried I could snap it in half, which I would never try to do ever. And with this reduction in thickness does come a lighter iPad Pro in general. I've never owned an iPad Pro in my life, let alone a 13-inch iPad, but I can confirm it doesn't feel too heavy. And honestly, over the last few days holding this thing, I can't help but smile at how great it feels in the hand, how great it looks. Apple really is rounding out what a perfect tablet should look and feel like. And a big part of why I smile at this has to do with the second thing I love, and that's the new Tandem OLED displays, or more formally known as the Ultra Retina XDR display. I'm gonna go out and say this. This is the best display I've ever owned in my entire life. The new OLED panels make everything on this iPad look so crisp, clear, sharp, vivid. Every adjective I can say about something looking visually stunning, this iPad Pro does that. You do have the option to buy the nano texture glass version, which helps with reflections, and I saw it in the Apple Store in person. It actually was quite good. I was actually very tempted to get that model instead until I saw I needed a 1 terabyte model minimum before I could pay for that upgrade, so my wallet said no thanks. Other great things about this display is that it goes up to 1000 nits of brightness with regular usage, making this iPad bright and very usable outdoors, with a 120 Hz ProMotion as well, which I've never experienced on an iPad before, so let me relish in it for a second in this video to say that I'm blown away at how smooth and fluid an iPad can feel. I'm also very happy with the fact that I went with the 13-inch version. I've always owned smaller iPads, and those are fine. No problem with those, but if you are looking for something like me to be your go-to device for everything, I think the 13-inch size will be much better in the long run with all the extra screen real estate and information that it's able to display at once. Overall though, with all of this display tech packed into here, man, I don't know if I could ever go back to a regular iPad. I would have a really hard time. Speaking of regular iPads, something those iPads don't have, and the third thing that I love about the new iPad Pro, has to do with the new redesigned Magic Keyboard. Before we discuss why it's awesome, I want to share something that's been a game changer to my tech setup: the Baseus 60-watt retractable cable. I'm pretty excited to partner with Baseus to show you this today because it's not quite like anything I've ever used before, so here's why it's awesome. First, it's super handy and fun. With just one hand, you pull it to the cable length that you need, and it retracts instantly once you're done. Perfect for keeping things neat and tidy. It's also very portable and travel friendly, fitting easily into small bags or even jean pockets. You'll never have to deal with tangled messes and bulky cables again. As for performance, it supports up to 60-watt fast charging, which is perfect for iPads, MacBooks, iPhones, and it's incredibly durable. It's been tested to handle over 50,000 pulls, so you don't need to worry about breaking it. Seriously though, this thing is solid, it's reliable. Check the link below to grab yours today. Trust me, you guys are not going to regret it. Thank you, Baseus, for partnering with me on this video. Okay, so why is this keyboard so great? First, the keys feel great to type on. The top of the body of the keyboard is now made of an aluminum that makes it feel like you're using a Mac. The trackpad is much bigger this time around as well, and I've noticed that I have more space for my palms to rest on, which was something I could not say before in the past about the other Magic keyboards. The new function row is also very handy with the ability to toggle cool things like brightness, volume, and more. And if you're wondering whether to get the black or white Magic Keyboard, I'd 100% go with the white one. I've owned a black Magic Keyboard for like the last forever now, and it gets dirty way too easily, while the white one seems to really stay clean a lot easier. I do have a more in-depth look at this Magic Keyboard coming in a separate video here on my channel, so subscribe so you don't miss that. But if you are thinking about buying this and you want my answer right now, I can 100% recommend this if your wallet can justify it, because this is very expensive to buy. Okay, so we've covered what I love so far: the new thin design, the new display, the new Magic Keyboard. So what exactly am I neutral about? It's the new M4 chip. I'm neutral about it for a few reasons. First, it's an incredibly powerful chip that benchmarks to be about as good as the M3 Pro chip on the MacBook Pro, and that's an incredible thing to pull off for a tablet, meaning anyone who buys this iPad will surely have this last them a very long time from a performance perspective. But the reason I'm neutral is that there really isn't anything for me on iPadOS to do where I feel like I can take advantage of just how powerful this is. The only scenario I was able to find where I was actually able to slow down this iPad was loading up Warzone on the iPad screen while trying to multitask apps on the studio display at the same time. I've said this for years. I've never felt like any iPad I've ever owned was slow, and I'm talking about those cheap 10th generation iPads and the iPad Air and the iPad Mini. They've always felt fast to me, and while it's amazing for this iPad Pro to be even more powerful now more than ever, it's like the equivalent of adding LeBron James to the 2017 Golden State Warriors super team of Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and prime Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. They were already the best team in the NBA by a mile. Adding a megastar in LeBron James would make almost zero difference, and they're almost 100% odds of winning a title that year. All right, so let's get to the controversial stuff. What don't I like about this new iPad Pro? For starters, I wasn't too pleased that I couldn't use both my old Magic Keyboard and Apple Pencil with it. I understand Apple is trying to make advancements with their hardware, but when things cost consumers upwards of $500 for both of these accessories, it really hurts to have to re-buy them again in just only a few years of owning them. Was it mandatory for Apple to make those previous accessories not compatible anymore to achieve the hardware feats that they're trying to do on this iPad? Possibly, I guess. We'll never know for sure, but it's a huge bummer and a deterrent for anyone who is interested in upgrading to this. And another deterrent, the second thing I don't like is how expensive iPad Pros specifically have become. And I know, I bought one, partially because it's my job, but as a regular consumer, it's hard to justify to those people thousands of dollars to get the iPad Pro, Magic Keyboard, Apple Pencil, when in reality, a MacBook Pro or even a MacBook Air would serve so many people better at a far cheaper price. And it doesn't need to be that way, to be honest, but it's because of my next gripe that makes this hard to justify at times, and that's the software limitations of iPadOS. Hey, it's a new day. I've actually had this iPad now for well over a week. So the best way that I could describe iPadOS software limitations is that there's just these weird quirks, odd things that you wouldn't expect to exist because you're so used to it on a Mac or on a Windows computer, and you just expect it to work on an iPad because this thing is, it's marketed like a computer. It has a keyboard and has an M4 chip, making it one of the most powerful computers out there. You would think that there wouldn't be these weird basic limitations. Number one, you cannot have more than 4 windows open at once in Stage Manager on the iPad Pro 13-inch, which is the one that I have, which is bizarre because on the MacBook Air, which is a 13-inch machine, which has an M3 chip, which is in all intents and purposes a less powerful computer, a system on chip, that can have as many windows as it wants. Also, another thing, there's no quick way for me to open up a new window when I'm using Safari. Like on a Mac, you just press Command N and then it opens up a new window. Simple, easy, right? But on an iPad, when I press Command N, it just opens up a new tab, which is really weird. And the only way that I can open up a new window is by long pressing the tab icon or whatever in Safari, and then I can press new window, and then it will open me a new window. Notion users, people that love Notion. I love Notion, it works great on my Mac, but for some reason on iPad, the developers just didn't think to allow us to open up new windows on Notion for iPad, so I'm pretty much stuck with one window in Notion unless I want to go into Safari and log into Notion into multiple windows within Safari to get my original like multi-window Notion setup that I'm used to. What I'm trying to get across, and what I didn't really get across in my original statement for this video, is that there's just quirks. There's these weird basic things about iPad OS that just don't really work well, or like these companies, like either Apple or the developers, just like miss the mark on just basic things. And I could go on for like another 10 minutes probably about just weird stuff. Like iPad OS to me is like 80, maybe 90% there on a generous day, but the other 10%, there's so much that it's missing. So many basic functions. If you can get past those, then you're gonna love this computer. Like, I love this computer because I've allowed myself to get past that, but this is a review, so I'm just telling you things that annoy me about it. But if you let these things annoy you, and they are going to annoy you, you're not gonna like using iPad OS, and you're not gonna like using this as a laptop, and you're just better off getting a Mac or buying a Windows computer. And that's just the reality right now. Maybe coming WWDC, things change, and we'll talk about that later in the video, but for now, you have to make that decision. So we've discussed what I've loved, what I'm neutral about, and what I'm disappointed with. And to quickly summarize, the iPad Pro is hardware perfection, but it costs a lot of money, and its software can feel so limiting in tiny ways that it adds up to some frustrations over time. But the big question, can this iPad Pro replace my MacBook? I think so. In most ways, it could, honestly, except when it comes to creating the videos that you see. I literally cannot do it on iPad Pro because it doesn't support half the stuff I use to create the content that you watch. If it did, it'd be a different story. But emails, productivity apps, video calls, social media, literally everything else I use a computer for, the iPad can do it. And when the apps that you use on your iPad are made right, like really right, they usually are almost perfect, sometimes perfection, and a lot better than the desktop version at times. And as a bonus, if you get the cellular version, having a constant 5G connection makes this iPad a real winner over something like a MacBook Air, in my opinion. So as long as you can deal with some of the software limitations in exchange for a really fun hybrid touch screen computer experience, you're gonna love this thing as much as I have over the last couple of days. My only hope for the future of iPad Pro when WWDC comes around in June of 2024 is that Apple finally unleashes iPad and lets people take more advantage of what's inside. I'm not asking for Mac OS on iPad. I want to make that very clear. I don't think that's the move like a lot of other people on the internet are wanting. I think Apple just needs to advance iPad OS in smart and useful ways to make it more comfortable and less annoying when it comes to the most basic things. For example, simple things like adding support for multiple users for the same iPad. For how much these things cost, like, come on, like they should be shareable devices like a MacBook. In addition to improving more on Stage Manager, improving the desktop experience when you connect it to a monitor, adding an always on display would be really cool for iPad, especially now that it has an OLED panel. This surely should be possible like it is on the iPhone. There's just so much that Apple can do to round out this experience, and I genuinely believe that if they do, who wouldn't want to use something as cool as an iPad Pro every day of the week? Let's switch gears to the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I've used that device every day for the last 8 months, and I recently uploaded my new long-term review of that device, so click right here to watch it now.